All my friends in college find it funny that I can't stand coffee, even the smell of it. I never go to coffee shops or cafes where coffee is served. I avoid any coffee-related smell and make sure that none of my friends drink coffee when I'm around. My high school friends remember how I would freeze up whenever I accidentally came in contact with the smell of coffee. At least now, I don't get so paralyzed. It took me a year of therapy to overcome that total body panic. My college friends think I have some sort of allergy. But what they don't know is that coffee has something to do with a psychological trauma caused by my father and his mysterious disappearance. One random Sunday during my senior year, my mother was hospitalized for food poisoning. Nothing serious, but she had to spend a couple of days there. Me and my dad stayed at the hospital till late, and once we were sure she was okay, we drove home. I don't really like hospitals, but I wasn't worried for my mom at all. We were living in a suburb, and the nearest hospital was 30 minutes away. It was raining, and we were driving on an empty highway, listening to the radio and talking about my future college life. At some point, I noticed a person a couple of miles ahead standing in front of a car with the emergency lights on. He didn't have an umbrella, just standing next to the car, signaling us for help. We stopped. "Hey, what happened?" asked my dad. "I have no idea. It just doesn't want to start, and there's a smell of gasoline. So I figure I'd rather call the service and have them look into it. But the earliest they can make it here is in 2 hours, and I just don't feel comfortable waiting on the highway inside the car with all that gasoline smell, you know? If you could give me a lift to the nearest Denny's, I'd really appreciate it," said the guy, who looked around 30. "Oh sure, there's one 4 miles up," replied my dad. Robert was the guy's name, but he preferred to be called Rob. When he got into the car, he had this strong smell of coffee mixed with paint. I thought it was weird he smelled of coffee and not gasoline. Besides, he was wearing leather gloves. I'd never seen anybody wearing gloves in the rain. Rob and my dad were chatting about driving in the rain when Rob's phone buzzed. He checked his phone, laughed, and I heard him typing something back. He got super excited after the message and explained that his best friend was coming to see him next week from another state. We were 2 miles away from Denny's when there was a loud bang. My father struggled with the steering wheel, but eventually the car skidded off the wet road. Nobody was injured. Dad and Rob got out of the car to see what happened. My dad came back to tell me we must have driven over something on the road, and both front tires had large punctures. "But you can fix it, right?" I asked. "Not really. I only have one spare tire. There is no signal, so we can't call anybody. We're not that far from Denny's. Me and Rob will walk there. Just sit here and I'll be back in 30 to 45 minutes. Don't worry, kid. Everything will be all right." I felt nervous, but didn't want to show it, so I sat watching the two figures disappear into the dark. The rain stopped, and an hour later, I saw one figure coming back towards the car. I hoped it was my father. He was carrying something in his hand, something round, like a bag with a ball in it. Soon enough, I recognized Rob. I tensed up. I couldn't stop looking at the round thing in his hand. With every step he made toward the car, that round thing started to look more and more like a human head, but I wasn't sure. My heart raced like crazy, and my body froze up. I tried to lift my hand to open the door and get out, but I couldn't move at all, and my mind went blank. I was just sitting and watching Rob come closer and closer and closer. Moments later, he was at the back door of the car. He peered in and looked at me. He smiled, and I saw his mouth had no teeth at all. He raised his hand with a knife in it. I looked at the knife. It had red paint on it, and something was telling me that it was someone's blood. He scratched the window with the knife, smiled again, and waved. I felt feverish, sweating like never before. He stood there looking at me for what seemed like hours, but then Suddenly, he laughed out loud, stood up, and started to walk away from the car, still holding something round in his hand. Maybe I was delusional, but I think I saw hair and blood dripping off that round thing. A cut-off head. I can't swear I saw it, but I think I did. I watched him slowly walk away, swinging that round thing from side to side, soon disappearing into the night. I just sat there, paralyzed. I could and probably should have gotten out of the car and run, but my body gave up on me completely. So I just sat there, mind blank. I don't know how long I spent in the car like that. Next thing I remember was a police car parking next to ours. The policeman came to the car and looked at me. He opened the door and asked something. I saw his mouth moving, but I couldn't hear a word. By the time they got me out of the car and drove me to the police station, I had finally regained some control over my body. Bit by bit, I managed to tell them the story. They told me that somebody called the police from the phone booth right outside of Denny's, telling them there was a road accident and that a boy was left in the car. That somebody gave them the exact location and hung up without revealing his name. They found my dad's wallet with no other fingerprints 500 meters away from the car. Nothing had been taken. They also found blood traces that disappeared some 200 or 300 meters from the car. The test, however, revealed that the blood wasn't my father's, but belonged to a 30-year-old man who disappeared in another state about a year ago. They never found Rob's car, nor my dad. The police wanted me to help them draw Rob's portrait, but the weird thing was that I could only remember his toothless smile and the smell of coffee and paint. I couldn't remember if he had hair or not. In one of my memories he did, but in the other, he was totally bald. I started to search on the internet about all these disappearances. Turned out that 4 women and men went missing the same year in neighboring states. They all disappeared during the rain, with their cars left on the highway. My dad was the 5th, and I was the first to survive. In all 5 cases, somebody anonymously called from a phone booth informing about the car accident and giving the exact location. Not a single person was found, except the blood of that man next to our car. Some speculate that Rob, or whatever his name is, escaped a psychiatric clinic where he was locked up for being a cannibal. There are even pictures shared by somebody of a mid-30s looking guy with long black hair, though he looks pretty normal. Some argue that he used to be a cop. That's why nobody can catch him. Some go even further, saying that he came from beyond, only appearing during the night when it rains. Anyway, whatever he is, my mom still refuses to give up hope of my father coming back one day. I did. I know, I saw a part of my father, and that part was in Rob's hands when he was walking away from the car. Soon after the accident, I discovered that whenever I smelled coffee, my body would automatically freeze. My heart would race like crazy, and I couldn't be capable of doing anything but sweating and being overwhelmed with this fear of the coffee and paint smell, along with Rob's toothless smile and loud laugh. I don't see him in my nightmares, just the smell of coffee and paint.